Yo guys, Coach Chad here, Quantum Leap Body Transformation Challenge. This time we are going to be diving into your guys' nutrition participants guide. So we are going to be working through the section food choices. Okay. Now within this section, simple one page, I would like you guys to read this multiple times and sink these pieces of information in and add them to your belief systems or possibly help them eliminate some of your current belief systems. So there are 3 points within this section called food choices. The first one is there is no such thing as a fat loss food or supplement. Now we're going to go into more detail on that in a second. Second point, there's no such thing as a fattening food. Third point, some foods are better for fat loss than others, and we'll dive into why that is. Now, we have actually addressed this multiple times. I think to some degree we have addressed this in every single week's videos, but we are going to repeat it. The mother of all learning is repetition, and also it must be understood how important these points are to your understanding of a body transformation as well as fat loss, because these things become what we're going to talk about in the mindset component, part of your current paradigms. Okay. And we'll get more into that over there. So the very first point is there's no such thing as a fat loss food or supplement. Now, we have lots of research on supplementation as to what supplements can and will maybe possibly assist with weight loss. And there are some. But the most important thing to understand with regard to weight loss is that simple old rule, the law of thermodynamics: calories in, calories out equals energy balance. You cannot beat this statement. You cannot beat that. You cannot work around it. You cannot get around it, okay? Your caloric intake has to be less than your output in order to lose weight. You cannot get around this. So right now, as you're going through and updating your progress tracker, if you are not dropping weight right now, your calories are too high for 2 different reasons. One, you're simply eating too much food. Second, you're tracking your food inappropriately. And it doesn't matter what the reason is. We just simply know that you are eating too much. And over the years, having done nutritional support and helping clients in personal training in the gym for now almost 15, 16 years, I have heard this over and over again. People come in and they provide me a food log and say, this is what I eat every day. And I add it up and I calculate it. It's around 850 calories. Now, no one on the face of the earth can eat 850 calories every day and not lose weight. That's not physically possible. But yet we hear all these things. Well, I have a slow metabolism. I have mostly carbohydrates in my diet. I don't function insulin, or my insulin sensitivity is off. You know, and every single little fad diet or a book out there that has all these kind of ranges of different reasons as to why people can't lose weight need to be disregarded. Okay, they're all very important, but for most people, when I say most, I'm talking about 99.9% of people, these issues and these things do not have anything to do with you. Okay. If someone was to truly eat 850 calories a day, as so many food logs that I've received in the past have come across, as they've come across my desk, if you did that on a daily basis, there would be no doubt you would lose weight. I also have no doubt that you wouldn't look great. You wouldn't have high energy levels. You wouldn't have the capacity to have good workflow. You would have poor sleeping habits. There's a lot of things that would come with that. But I guarantee that you would, in fact, lose weight. Whether it's the weight you want to lose or not is immaterial, but you would be losing weight. You'd be losing fat tissue as well as lean muscle mass. There's no way around this. So what this usually means for the individual that hands me that food log is, one, and I hate to say this, is just harsh, I'm sorry, they're lying to me and themselves about what they actually eat. And I don't mean that in a negative content, but they're not being truthful as to what their diet actually looks like. And this is imperative for all of us to actually take a true stand on where are we currently and what are we actually doing, and being very honest about our intakes and our outputs. Okay. And then secondly, it's possible that individuals just simply do not track food correctly. And this has actually been shown in research over and over again that tracking food is difficult. And most people are not the greatest at it, but you are honing your skills now and you're developing your skill sets on that. So as an example, a lot of times people won't track butter on their bread, mayo on their sandwich, cooking oils in their food. And these things add up to a lot of calories at the end of the day. So sometimes it's not intentional. Most of the times it's actually not, but there's a lot of places where people go off on tracking food. Okay. And then what we end up getting to this conversation with, going back to point one, where there is no fat loss food or supplement, they're constantly looking for the quick fix or the simple solution. How do I get from here to here easily? And the answer is get really good at tracking your food and being very consistent at putting that food in, okay? And recognize your mouth is not a vacuum, and you've got to track and follow your food appropriately as outlined, okay? In order for a food to truly be a fat loss food, it would have to have a negative calorie balance or a thermic effect of feeding of 100%. And there is no such food out there that is that. Probably the closest, as an example, most of us know of is celery, right? Celery is such a high fiber food, high water content. People always say you could live on celery, and actually you wouldn't be able to live on celery because it takes more energy to digest celery than it does that it actually has within it. And that's not totally true, but it's very, very close. That's probably one of the closest foods with regard to the thermic effect of feeding and caloric load. But again, it's not an example that actually holds water with regard to our general food intake over the day. So when it comes to a fat loss food, there is no such thing. It does not exist, okay? Caloric deficit over time is the only answer to true weight loss over time. Now, the next one is supplementation. Now, this is a bit of a deeper dive because when you get into supplementation, now we're talking about something a bit different. There is a lot of research out there with regard to supplements that can assist weight loss. But I have to kind of put a caveat on this. And the reason I have to do that is because none of them are actually showing true great weight loss outcomes that you cannot do, that can happen without a caloric deficit. So I want to make sure that's clear. Without a caloric deficit, you still can't lose weight, even if you take in copious amounts of omega-3s, fatty acids, vitamin D, yerba mate, teas, things like that, okay? Most supplements that have been shown to be useful for fat loss have something to do with fat oxidation and the digestion and the mobilization of fat tissue when you're in a caloric deficit. So in the past, things like CLA, conjugated linoleic acid, omega-3 fatty acids have all been shown to be minor levels of positive outcomes for fat loss, as well as caffeine supplementation, which simply just increases your output or your metabolic rate. And then other things like yerba mate, ephedrine, and there's a bit of a deeper dive. We can go into each one of those. But again, I don't recommend necessarily any of them other than simply having omega-3 fatty acid in your supplementation routine. But that's for other purposes around health, not necessarily weight loss, because all of the tools and all the research out there with regard to supplementation and weight loss is minimal at best. It is simply the 0.05% when you've done 99.5% of all the other things that are required. And 90% of what you have to do right now is track your darn food, make sure you're in a caloric deficit, and hitting your protein counts. These are the most important things you can do. So I do not want you to waste any time and energy thinking about all these other things that you can do that may help out to get you that little 0.5, because you're missing putting the energy to the 99.5. Okay. So I hope I'm clear on that. Okay, now, next point is there's no such thing as a fattening food. Now, to some degree, this is actually the exact same statement as the one before, but so many times when I discuss with people, I talk to people, they say, oh, Brett, it's fattening. You've got to explain to me how this happens, okay? And I see this kind of stuff all over the place. There's two main culprits of this. One is carbohydrates are fattening. Not the truth. Get rid of this idea. Not the case, okay? Inherently inappropriate, not the way to look at the insulin response in the body. It is not accurate. Secondly, fatty foods are fat, that are fat, assist in fat gain. And again, going back to the same comment, how do you lose weight? You must be in a caloric deficit over a consistent period of time with appropriate calorie and protein levels, okay? Now that is clear. So with regard to fattening foods, any food can be fattening if you eat too much of it. All right. Now, again, this is the same statement just said in the reverse order, but no food is fattening, but some foods just make it a hell of a lot harder to hit your calorie counts and your protein goals. So I'll give you a basic example. Let's use something that when I was experimenting with keto, because I like to experiment with dietary choices, I used a lot of things like pork rinds. Now, pork rinds are both high in fat and protein, so they did help me a little bit with my protein counts, but the problem is they're so high in fat and calories relative to per gram of them that I found them to be very non-satiating, very nutrient non-dense, so there's not a lot of nutrients in relative to fruits and vegetables and things like that per gram. So at the end of the day, my food volume was so low that it would traditionally cause me a lot of hunger pangs, a lot of issues with satiety, and I found it difficult to stay on diets when you have very high fat foods in your diet. Another good example would just be simply adding mayo and butters and things like that to your salads. So as an example, I'm going to be a little harsh here again, but I was at Subway the other day and I forgot my lunch, so which is a very routine thing in my life. So I run up the street to Subway, which is very close to the gym, and I usually get my turkey sandwich with double meat. And remember, you can do all kinds of things when you eat out. So I traditionally choose the better protein source, which in this case at Subway is turkey. I double the meat. It's low in fat, high in protein. Or I'll get a salad with triple or quadruple meat on it to make the protein a little bit higher. But in this case, I had my turkey sandwich, and I usually just put a small line of yellow mustard on, which is calorically null and void. So there's no calories with it, and the rest is just all the vegetables. So it's a very healthy sandwich, if you wish, from that perspective. And caloric content range somewhere around about 550 to 570 calories for that meal, plus the additional protein, which adds in about 18 grams of protein in the double serving, which then bumps it up to somewhere around an extra 80 calories. So I'm around 650 probably total in for that meal. And it's satiating, it's filling, it's got a lot of nutrients in a lot of the vegetables and stuff that are put inside of it. But my point was, when I'm standing in line, I see everyone doing this. They order, whatever sandwich they want to order. If it's a pizza sub, a meatball sub, a turkey sandwich, it doesn't really matter. But whatever they order, they get to that darn condiment line. And those guys are famous at putting, if you said, I want Southwest sauce or whatever, it's just going to be higher in fat because of the oils in it. Those guys go up and down 3 or 4 times on there. They've probably added somewhere between 4 and 6 tablespoons of Southwest sauce. Now, I don't know what the caloric content of that is, but I know this. Many people that watch in line will have 2 to 3 sauces. They over double the calories in their sandwich simply through the additional sauces. These are the things that we have to get rid of. So people would say, well, that's a fattening food. Well, it is, because it increases the caloric content of the food, but it does not increase the satiety or the nutrient density of the food, which is really just a bad combo. Okay. So you have to be very cautious with regard to all those little things that you're adding to your foods, and you're tracking them correctly. And also that maybe they're just things that you can get rid of that will help you in your journey. Okay. And then the third point on here is essentially the fact that there are some foods that are better for fat loss than others. Now, I think through the first 2 points, I've already addressed this. But again, the things that you want to see in your food, go back to our 9 principles that we started off with. You want fewer calories per gram. So the example of the sauces on the Subway sandwich or the pork rinds have a very high caloric load per gram of food, which is not really going to be advantageous to weight loss and your goals. Solid rather than liquid. So a perfect example is I'm a bit of a I have an issue with 0-cal Coca-Cola or Pepsi. I usually have one of those a day, but I know a lot of people who won't drink the diet version, but this diet version has 0 calories, right? We have another later section coming up about aspartame and sweeteners and why they're not as evil as you may think. But if you would have that in just a regular Pepsi, you'd probably be taking in somewhere between 38 and 41 grams of sugar. So an extra 150 to 200 calories in just a drink. But this isn't satiating. So it's things like that that become poor food choices with regard to liquid. And again, same thing. If you think about like even a post-workout shake, which can be advantageous to getting more protein counts in, but if you're adding carbohydrates and protein to your post-workout shake, you can easily have a 500 calorie shake, but it does not fill you up as would say that turkey sandwich, which was an equivalent in caloric load. Okay. So that's another problem that we run into with regard to weight loss. High in fiber was the next point. So high in fiber, one has a very high thermic effect of feeding, just like protein does. We didn't really touch on it last time, but it does. And then secondly, it slows the digestive tract. It also increases the digestion rate and things that are required for transit time. Well, I guess it depends on if it's soluble or insoluble, but a high fiber food will also allow for a more natural and slower process of getting the nutrients into the bloodstream, which will not allow for big sugar spikes and drops in energy levels. So you're not always coming back and looking for food. So they increase the satiety one more time, which is incredibly important when you're in a caloric deficit. Okay, it could potentially be one of the most important. And then the other point was high in protein. And we discussed this last time. There's lots of foods that are higher in protein that you might be able to choose. My classic example, even though it does have a protein powder in it, would be like power cakes, or my Kodiak cakes I use as a bit of a protein source with regard to the pancakes I ingest on a regular basis. Now, these are things that you can find, but I also want you to be cautious of this because there's a lot of foods out there. A good example may be some of those like the little chips. I can't remember what they're called, but there's little protein chips, and there's a million different places that people add proteins, or maybe a protein cookie. When you look at the back of the serving size, yes, you get more protein, but in some of those foods or drinks, you'll find that the carbohydrate and fat content is higher than the actual cookie itself. So you'd be better served to just go have a normal cookie and then have a protein shake or some other form of protein on the side. Putting them together is not always an advantage because, again, it comes down to that satiety effect of the food, the nutrient density of the food, the caloric load of the food, all relative. Okay, so these are all aspects that you have to put into perspective when making your food choices. And the last one is a whole food. Now, the whole food, we've addressed this in our original principles. A whole food choice is always your best choice because of all the reasons. I feel like a broken record right now. Increased fiber, increased nutrient density, lower caloric load relative to its weight. Okay. And again, I think I mentioned more nutrients, but again, these are things that are going to be incredibly important for you. So you have more volume of food relative to the caloric load, which means weight loss and a caloric deficit is much easier to maintain, because the problem is over time, maintenance of a caloric deficit is challenging. Okay. It can be very challenging. So you've got to put in play food choices and habits that make it easy. And if you adhere to those basic rules of whole food, high protein, high fiber, choose solid foods over liquid foods, and foods that contain few calories per grams, you got it made, man. You got that. You got it. Okay. Now, most important, the last point in this document says you don't have to remove foods. And I've mentioned this before as well, but there are certain foods you may have to remove from your diet for a couple different reasons. One, they're a trigger. Okay. So as an example, I know that little 5-cent gummies and these very specific chips or little tortilla chips that every once in a while we buy when we have friends or family over, if they're in the house, I have a problem. So when we're done Halloween, all that stuff hits the garbage right away. Hits the garbage or is given away somehow, but we don't have it in our house. And the reason being is I can't control myself. I know myself, and I know that I have poor willpower with regard to certain foods. So you need to remove those foods from your household. That usually means a pantry clean out, which is in your later section. But again, if you haven't done it already, please go through your house, talk to your family members, talk to everyone else that around you, and make sure that they're aware of the process you're on. And I want you to be clear that you need to get rid of these foods out of your house. If they're triggers, get rid of them. Okay. They need to be gone, and you can replace them with something else. I've used this example in the past, but I love sugar-free and calorie-free. It's not calorie-free. It's got 5 calories per, but little packages of cup of Jello. This is one of my favorite. So gelatin. And when I'm having a craving, or I feel like I've had poor food choices throughout the day and I'm a little hungry at the end of the day, it's my first go-to is I have traditionally anywhere between 20 and 50 little 1 cup of Jellos, very low calorie. So I think they're about 5 calories per cup. Things of Jello. It gives me my sweet taste. It gives me the texture I enjoy. It allows me to sit down and kind of have a moment to relax, and I get my Jello. Okay. So again, that's part of the way you can remove a trigger and put more healthy habit in its place. Then the other thing on the same point though, guys, I want to make sure it's clear. You do not have to eliminate foods from your diet. I think this is one of the worst things that diets have done over the years. They have elimination portion. And a good example would be paleo. Okay. When we used to do paleo and we were really hard on it, you couldn't eat rice. And the reason you couldn't eat rice was because Paleolithic people didn't eat rice. Okay. These are not good reasons to be removing food, right? So we removed entire groups of food. So example, bread. Well, if you're allergic to gluten, you should probably remove some of these foods. If they're allergies or sensitivities or intolerances, get rid of them because they're not adding to your potential for digestive health and your GI tract health. But you need to get rid of them because they're only going to make you feel bad. And when you feel bad, you're going to also make bad food choices. It's kind of like being low in sleep. Okay. So again, good food choices that match your personal lifestyle. But I don't like restrictive diets. I think they're silly. I think they're counterproductive, and they add no value. If you're not allergic to gluten, then have bread. Why in God's name would you not have bread if you can? Okay. There's not an issue here. Now, if you just, it's the same as maybe being a vegetarian. If you don't want to eat meat for moral reasons, that's fine. I'm going to. but you don't have to, and that's fine. You can make your food choices however you want, and they fit within these rules very well. So you've got to make the choices to where that's going to sit and how that's going to work. But again, you've got to find those things. But just recognize there is no such thing as a good food, no such thing as a bad food, no such thing as a fattening food, and no such thing as a fat loss food. These are silly concepts, and we have got to rid these from our thought processing and our belief systems. They become limiting belief systems when we hold such, sorry, but wacky and crazy ideas. They have no foundation in science, and they have no foundation in actual weight loss. Okay. I hope that makes sense, guys. I hope that also spurred some questions that you guys could forward to us this week. Would love to answer them. Have a great week. And we are going to now move on to the shopping list. Thank you, team.